Good evening, everybody. I would like to thank Melek, first of all, for organizing this amazing event. I was sitting in the front, didn't realize the whole room is full. It's a great success. I'd also like to thank the two speakers ahead of me. Loved hearing your experiences and your dreams. I'm humbled in your presence. And thank all of you for being here and supporting Melek, what Melek is trying to achieve and her dream. There are some familiar faces in the crowd, but for those of you that I don't know, I'd like to begin with a little of a background to sort of set the stage for the dream I had, how I played literally and figuratively, and how I achieved in my humble standards. The experience of going from Wall Street to Beijing Olympics in 2008 was, to say the least, a very personal and intense experience. But there were also very many parallels that came out of the experience that I think are applicable to what each of us go through in our lives when we dream, when we try to play, and when we try to achieve. So I hope those perspectives come out while I talk about the story. I'd like to do this sort of, parallel as I'm talking about the story and what happened in the a few years leading up to the 2-year event that I experienced. I grew up in Bodrum, although I was born in Izmir originally, and my family moved to Bodrum when I was 5 years old, so I practically grew in the sun and the wind and the water, and as you might guess, it was very natural for me to start sailing at a very young age. Windsurfing was a very new sport in Turkey at the time. This is, early 80s, not the Alaçatı that we have right now. But, I started windsurfing at the very young age of 8, going on 9. And, started windsurfing every day that I could, besides having to go to school on the weekends or on the weekends and the holidays. And concurrently, I also started middle school and high school. So as you can imagine, it was, not the easiest balance, but I was very determined in being good at windsurfing and wanted to be competitive at it. And I started competing very quickly within 2 to 3 years of starting the sport. My efforts, I must say, must have caught the attention of the Ministry of Sport at the time. So the guy who was sort of the regional head of Ministry of Sports in the Aegean region pulled me aside one day and said, look, you seem very talented. If you work hard enough, you might one day become a competitor in the international circuit. I had never thought of this, never had heard of it. We didn't have internet at the time that, you could just go online and start learning about it. But, I started thinking about it and just sort of dreaming about it, not really knowing what I was dreaming about. And shortly thereafter, actually, the first Olympic women's event in windsurfing was announced for the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. And me at the age of 15 decided that was my dream. I wanted to go to the Olympics in 1992, represent Turkey, and become an Olympian. Little did I know, a year into that dream, practically speaking, I broke my wrist windsurfing and was very much sidelined for a whole year, which is a pretty long year in the sort of time frame of an Olympian. So I decided this was it. I never wanted to, go windsurfing anymore or sailing anymore because I couldn't believe with just within a moment all my dreams could get crushed. Again, I was only 14, 15 years old at the time. This was the first brick wall I had hit in my whole life. It eventually became a business school essay for me, and obviously one of many brick walls later on in life. But I did sort of switch tacks. I continued windsurfing more for enjoyment, but I decided to concentrate on school and hanging out with friends, and went on years forward, graduated from university, started working in New York. And I sort of thought I was living the dream that I wanted at the time, living in New York. I had also gotten into the yachting scene in the United States. And yachting is an interesting sport because you can actually have very professional athletes with the amateurs racing on the same course, both competing against each other and competing with each other if they happen to be on the same boat. So that was sort of I thought it was a nice balance where I could, work very intensely during the week as a consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers at the time in New York. And on the weekends, or on all my holidays, practically speaking, I could go sailing and compete with the professional sailors that I would read about on the magazines. In the meantime, I went back to school. I got my MBA, and I, really wanted to work on Wall Street since the movie Wall Street, the first one. And so I decided to take a job opportunity with Goldman Sachs and started working in investment banking in New York. For those of you that might be familiar with the lifestyle, it's as intense as it gets in New York, or probably in the rest of the world. Days and nights and weekends. But I was living the dream. I was in New York in investment banking. Just around that time, now we're past the 90s and on to the 2000s. In 2004, after the 2004 Olympics, the Olympic Committee decided to change the windsurfing equipment. This was sort of a very key change, in the lives of the Olympic athletes, because it's one equipment that everybody learns how to use. And when they changed the equipment, Olympians that had been competing for 2, 3, 4 times, which if you think in Olympic terms, 4, 8, 12, 16 years, decided to quit the sport. There was a lot of athletes retiring and a lot of new athletes that could come in, basically, not having to, compete against the people who were very familiar with the old equipment. It would be very difficult for me to identify who it was at the time, but a few people somehow planted the seed in my head that I could actually now jump back in the game after 15 years and be able to compete again and become an Olympian before it was too late from an age perspective. What seemed like a very, very crazy idea at the time, within a couple of months, didn't seem so crazy. And as I started talking to people around me, when I expected people to say, look, we've known you've been crazy all your life, but this is one of the craziest ideas you've come up with, I actually started saying, this is an amazing idea, you should absolutely do this. If you don't do this ever, you're not going to do this. If you miss 2 years on Wall Street, Wall Street is not going to go anywhere. It's going to be here. Little did they know, that changed very quickly. But at the time, in 2006, in the beginning of another bull market, that was a very smart idea. So I made up my mind. I went to talk to the management at Goldman Sachs, thinking that they're going to think I'm completely insane. And on the contrary, they were actually the first ones to say, this is an amazing idea. You should absolutely do this. We will be here behind you, supporting you, not financially, but in other ways. So, I spoke to them, I think, middle of June, and by June 29th, I had packed off everything that belonged to me, physically, into a storage facility in New York, said goodbye to all my friends and my life in New York and everything that came with it, and picked up my Olympic equipment that arrived from the mail the day before, and practically moved to Turkey, to Bodrum, from New York, and started sailing. The first day was a 15-minute day on the water, even though I had been training for 3 months physically in New York to be able to keep up with the training. The physical aspect of it, I really expected to be difficult. And, my days went from 15 minutes on the water to an hour in the morning for fitness training, 2 hours on the water, another 2 hours on the water, another hour, after that for recovery. I would sleep 10 hours at night and half an hour during the day, and I wasn't a sleeper before this. So the physical transformation from going from an intense Wall Street job to an Olympic lifestyle was not as easy as I had expected. But I had a plan, and I was going to execute my plan. The plan was to be in Turkey for 3 months, to prepare for the sort of the technique of windsurfing and just being back in the sport, and then to go back to the United States for 3 months, and train with a coach, an American Olympian, 2-time medalist, Michael Gebhardt, and then start racing January of 2007, which would have been about a year and a half before the Olympics and 7 months before the first qualifier for the Olympics. I went back to the States. I trained with the coach for 3 months, and I, entered my first competition in the United States in Miami in January of 2007. I did okay. Obviously, it wasn't spectacular results, but I felt like I, could keep up with everybody. I was finishing the course around the same time everyone else was. I was obviously making, mistakes left and right, but, I had the confidence that I could get there in a year and a half. I came back to Turkey knowing that the Turkish Sailing Federation was running their national championship, and I competed in the nationals in Turkey, more for, just sailing, racing experience. I ended up doing really well in that competition with a pretty big margin against all the other Turkish female sailors, pretty much head-to-head with the male sailors. So, I was quite proud of myself for, having built up my confidence quickly. Turkish Sailing Federation was, I think, quite surprised that I just came out of nowhere. We didn't have internet, so you couldn't go back to the 1980s and the early 90s and see my name from the listings there. But they immediately named me to the Olympic squad, basically the Olympic sailing team of Turkey, and said that they would support me financially if I wanted to, compete for the Turkish team, which wasn't my original plan, to be perfectly honest. But, over the previous 7 months, I realized how much of a nationalistic thing the Olympics was, and it wasn't just me competing, but it was, Turkey competing on the race course, because we all have our country flags on our sails. And even though I had become an American by then, I felt more Turkish than ever being on the race course and talking to everybody. So within 2 months, I took all that offer and started sailing and representing Turkey on the international waters and all the Olympic competitions. I did a race in France and a race in Spain, and basically leading up to the race that was the first qualifier for the Olympics in July of 2007. This was in Portugal. I did better than I expected, and I did better than I think the team had expected. They were going to pick 20 Olympic spots from that event, and I was the 21st. I honestly didn't expect to be 21 in that event, but I was very happy, and that basically confirmed that I was going to make it, because 7 were more going to be elected 6 months later in New Zealand. So I came back to Turkey, went back to hard work, and got to New Zealand a month early. Unfortunately, things in New Zealand didn't turn out as I had planned. My body never got acclimated to the water or the wind or the weather there. It's a 13-hour jet lag. I just could never get my body to work the way I was accustomed to. And I again missed the qualification in New Zealand by 1 spot. By this point, we're in 2008 January, 6 months or 8 months from the Olympics. I mean, brick wall wouldn't even be a good definition to what I was feeling. I felt crushed. I felt like everything I did and all my hard work had gone down, basically. And but before I got back on the plane to actually fly back to Turkey, I got a call from the Turkish Sailing Federation and from the Turkish Olympic Committee stating that they would be nominating me to get a spot on the Olympics in case there was basically somebody not attending to the Olympics. They have this wait list in the Olympic competitions, the Summer Games. They invite 10,000 athletes, and once you are invited and qualified, you're expected to go. But there are many athletes who in that same time period get disqualified for any number of reasons, including illegal drugs, or countries that decide they don't want to compete in that event, or they don't want to go to the Olympics. So there was a small chance that I could get asked to come to the Olympics on that list. This was actually probably the hardest phase of the training, because now I had in my mind, a very small chance of being asked to go to the Olympics, but I had to keep up with all the training that everyone else was doing leading up to the Olympics. The last 6 months worldwide with all the Olympic athletes is the sort of the hardest training. Everyone really steps up. Everyone is trying to get to their best level by August. So I sat down and did another plan, and I collaborated with a couple of other athletes that were already qualified. I went to their countries to train with them. From their perspective, they saw me as not a very strong competitor, so they were okay sharing their information with me. I went to Canada to train. I went to the European Championships in France. I invited a private coach to come to Turkey and work with me for a few weeks. And now we're like 2 months before the Olympics, and I got a call from the Turkish Sailing Federation saying that they were able to get a spot for me on the Turkish Olympic team and to attend Beijing. This is June 12th of 2008. I will never forget the date. And I started, preparing, and I invited the coach back to Turkey, and I spent the next, basically 3 weeks in the water every day. And on July 30th, we met in Istanbul as the Turkish Olympic team, which was about 90 athletes, to go to Beijing. The Turkish Olympic Committee had organized a number of private and public events for us to be, interacting with, with Turks, and we had a farewell. And got on the plane, landed in Beijing, and the next 4 weeks were basically a dream come true for me. Beijing was probably one of the most amazing Olympics that was ever organized, and it might be that way for the next few Olympics to come. Our sailing village, the sailing village was 450 kilometers from Beijing, so it was another flight away. And it was 400 athletes in the sailing village, and once you got there, the athletes were registering, preparing, and I was just walking around, couldn't believe that I was, part of this very elite group of people. Everyone's had been working, for 8, 12, 16 years practically to be there. There were a lot of athletes going around telling me that they couldn't believe I made it. And, I think they were just as, happy for me as I was for myself. For the opening ceremony, the Beijing Olympic Committee flew all of us up to Beijing. There were 5 different satellite villages. And the actual Olympic village itself is only for athletes and other authorized people. So, you walk into this, when I say village, it's basically a private townhouse complex. And, there's Roger Federer walking, there's Kobe Bryant walking, there's Michael Phelps, swimming in the pool. The whole thing was just a little surreal. But, you would think that I was the only one with basically like a little kid with candy in her hand, but every other athlete was just as impressed to see one another. And, you could see the other professional athletes going and getting cards or signatures from everybody else. So not only was it so amazing for me, but I realized how amazing it is for the other athletes that attended. Because there are a lot of elite athletes that don't actually even make it to the Olympics ever in their careers. So, for some of the athletes there, it was such an honor to be there. And I had never even expected to feel the feelings that I was feeling in the Olympic Village, how unique it was, and how much the countries meant to people, and how much being in this environment meant to people. And I'm sure this is what, in ancient Greece dreamed of when they put the Olympics together. It's the 5 rings, and it, brings everybody in a very friendly environment to compete with one another. That said, the opening ceremony was probably the second most amazing part of the Olympics. And we, staged up at 4 p.m. and they took us to the Olympic Stadium in buses and lined us up. And Turkey, according to the Chinese alphabet, is the 3rd letter or the word. So we were the 3rd ones to walk into the stadium, which was nice. And a lot of athletes had told me, you're never going to understand how you're going to feel until you walk into that stadium. And I couldn't really grasp what they were saying, but walking into the stadium behind the Turkish flag, we were all in our white and red uniforms. And just, automatically we started, smiling and waving at the whole crowds. And we walk in and walk around the whole stadium, which is about 800 meters. So it felt like I was walking in the clouds. It was 90,000 people cheering, fireworks going off everywhere. A truly international event, a truly peaceful event. Everybody's happy to be there, especially considering what's going on in the world right now. I think they should take everybody from Middle East and let them walk through the Olympic Stadium once just to feel what it means, the humanity of it. The event lasted until 2 in the morning. We watched 10,000 athletes walk through the room, 200 country names that I had never even heard of before in their uniforms. I'm sure this is difficult to watch on TV, but to see it in real life and to basically understand the bigness of the globe, that was worth the 2 years of hard work in my case. The rest of the Olympics was, very much a typical race. And everybody was even more intense than ever because people had, again, like I said, spent 12, 16 years to be there to get a medal. And if you don't get a medal this time, the next time you may potentially get a medal is 4 years later. An Olympic medal is 4 years later. So the intensity on the race course was very clear. And of course, me going in as a 27th person on the women's event, I was happy. I mean, I wanted to do better, but I realized that just being there and being part of that group and racing with that group was an honor in itself. I actually did really well. I sailed faster than I ever had sailed, but so did everybody else. So my results, did not grant me anything more than a 27th spot. But when I finished the Olympics, I wanted to sit back and reflect upon the experience. And everybody, at the last day of the Olympics starts talking about what happens in 2012. The way the Olympic ceremony closes is the English team at the time was the 2012 Olympians. They come in and they take over from the Chinese. So as the Chinese ceremony closes, the British ceremony essentially starts. And so when everyone starts talking about the 2012 games and what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, I, for a brief moment, thought about training for the 2012. I realized I had learned a lot. I could do really well. Not as well as a medal, but I could probably go to top 10 places. But then I also realized the opportunity cost was very high for me. I had a career and an amazing education, lots of friends and family that I couldn't really keep up with for 2 years. I missed a lot of important days in their lives. And so I decided I wanted to go back to my real world, to finance. That said, 3 weeks after that, Lehman collapsed. The financial world came to an end, for lack of a better term. And I put my next dream, which is basically going back to finance and getting back in the real workforce, became a dream for a brief moment. A year after that, and with many brick walls that I ran into again, and some, great surprises, I actually had the opportunity to go back to Goldman Sachs, this time in London. So, I feel like I'm living another dream. But I just wanted to tell you this story, and I hope, I was able to basically express how I felt at the time. But the basic key points that I wanted to share with everybody that I learned from this experience was that timing is almost everything. I would have never had the opportunity to do something like this if the timing didn't line up. Have courage to follow your heart. Take calculated risks. In my case, I thought I could, potentially optimistically, I thought I could qualify. But I did set realistic goals. I never set the goal that I was going to get a gold medal. My goal was to be, even if it was the 27th spot in the Olympics in women's windsurfing, I wanted that spot. Planning and execution, I think, are key in dreaming, playing, and achieving. I spent a lot of time planning my days, what I ate, what I didn't eat, all the supplements I took, who I trained with, who I didn't train with, which competitions I went to, and execution likewise. Of course, I made a lot of mistakes, but you know, you only learn from them as you make them. You can't plan for everything. And with that said, you know, believe in karma and believe in luck, because you can only control so much in life. And you know, I could control how well I did. I couldn't control how well or how badly the others did. Every time I thought I was very well prepared, you know, I would either surprise myself by how much better than others I was, or how much worse than others I was. And that external stuff you can never control in life. So you have to believe in karma and put your basically best foot forward. Same thing with luck. You know, you need to be prepared when the luck comes. I was prepared when the Olympic Committee called me and said they got me a spot on the Beijing Olympics. I didn't show up there, you know, basically having sat on the sidelines for the previous 3-4 months, not working out or not, you know, eating right or not doing the right things. When I showed up to the Olympics, I was in the best shape I had ever been. You know, I was down to 6% body fat. I could row for 40 minutes, which is pretty incredible to do. I can barely do 10 minutes right now. I could sail no problem. There was a lot of things I could do, but I wouldn't have been there if I hadn't still kept on working, even though, you know, there was a great chance that I wasn't going to make it to the Olympics. But most importantly, I also learned that life is always not romantic. Dreams are not always romantic. My lifestyle at the time, a lot of my friends even would say, you look at your great life, you're going around the world windsurfing, you're doing what you love. A lot of the places I was windsurfing at were, you know, 9-degree weather and haze. And, you know, freezing cold. I was away from all my friends, my family, people, you know, I was missing friends' birthdays, weddings, childbirths, a lot of important things that make life what it is. So once I realized it, I did reevaluate what my dream was going to be. And that's the last message I want to give. Always consider your opportunity cost and make sure that the decision or the dream you have is the one that is the best one for you. Lastly, I think another key message I want to give from tonight's talk is that what got me to Beijing and back wasn't just the dream of going to the Olympics or playing and achieving that, but it was many more other dreams and plays and achievements that either I succeeded at or failed at or hit a brick wall. Keep that in mind, and you know, try to enjoy the road, because there are many dreams that we have for the day, for the week, for the month, for the year, or for our lifetimes. But if you don't enjoy every second of it, if you don't sort of play in those little ones, and whether you achieve or not at the end, the experience and the journey itself is what makes it worth. When I look back, going from Izmir and Bodrum to Wall Street and working on Wall Street was a dream at the time. Later on, you know, just sailing or competing against Olympians, you know, people that I had read about. The woman who got the silver medal at the Olympics is someone who was my idol when I was 15 years old, and she was still competing. Just being on the same race course with her, or you know, beating her in some races was a dream come true. Eventually going to the actual Olympics was a dream come true. And right now, you know, going back into finance and living in London is a dream come true for me. So I'm sure there's other smaller dreams in your lives that may not seem like a dream right now, but at some point it was or it will be a dream. So try to enjoy those moments as well. Thank you.